James Hartford had everything a man could want. His ranch stretched across 15,000 acres of prime Montana land, his horses were worth more than most people's homes, and his bank account had more zeros than he could count. But as he lay in his king-sized bed on that crisp October morning, pretending to be asleep, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, doubt about the people around him. At 42, James had learned the hard way that wealth attracted two kinds of people, those who wanted something from him, and those who wanted everything from him. His ex-wife had taken half his fortune in the divorce. His former business partner had embezzled hundreds of thousands before disappearing into the night. Even his own brother had asked for loans that were never repaid. Trust, James had decided, was a luxury he could no longer afford. Which brought him to this moment, lying perfectly still, breathing slowly and deeply, listening to the soft footsteps of his new housemaid, Rosa Martinez, as she entered his bedroom to begin her morning cleaning routine. He'd hired Rosa 3 months ago through an agency. She was different from the others, quiet, almost painfully shy, with eyes that rarely met his and a voice barely above a whisper. She was in her mid-20s, he guessed, though her reserved demeanor made her seem younger. She arrived at dawn, worked until sunset, and left without asking for anything extra, never complained, never made small talk, never tried to charm him like so many others had. And that, paradoxically, made James suspicious. In his experience, everyone wanted something. Everyone had an angle. So he devised this test: pretend to sleep and see what Rosa did when she thought no one was watching. Would she rifle through his drawers? Pocket something valuable? Snoop through his personal papers? He'd left $100 bill casually sitting on his dresser, an easy temptation for anyone with questionable morals. Through barely opened eyes, James watched her move silently around the room. She was wearing her usual simple attire, a plain gray dress, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, her movements efficient and careful. She started by opening the curtains just enough to let in the morning light without it being too harsh, a consideration he'd noticed before but never mentioned. Rosa picked up the empty water glass from his nightstand, her hands steady despite their slight tremor. Was she nervous? Scared? She glanced at him, and James made sure to keep his breathing deep and even. Satisfied he was still asleep, she continued her work, dusting the furniture with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the calloused hands he'd noticed during their few brief interactions. Then something unexpected happened. Rosa paused at his dresser, and James felt his muscles tense. Here it comes, he thought cynically. Here's where she shows her true colors. She picked up the $100 bill, holding it up to the light, examining it. James's jaw clenched. He'd been right not to trust her. But Rosa didn't pocket the money. Instead, she carefully folded it, walked over to his jacket hanging on the chair, and slipped it into the inside pocket, the secure one, where he always kept his wallet. Then she did something that made James's breath catch in his throat. She pulled out her own small, worn wallet from her apron pocket. From it, she extracted a crumpled $5 bill, possibly all the cash she had, and placed it on the dresser in the exact spot where the 100 had been. She stood there for a moment, her hand hovering over the money, her shoulders rising and falling with what seemed like a heavy sigh. Then she went back to cleaning as if nothing had happened. James was stunned. What kind of logic was that? Why would someone making minimum wage replace his money with her own? His curiosity now genuinely piqued, James continued his charade, watching as Rosa moved to clean the master bathroom. Through the partially open door, he could hear the soft sounds of her work, the spray bottle, the gentle scrubbing, the running water. But then he heard something else. Something that made his chest tighten. She was singing. So softly he could barely hear it, but it was definitely singing, a gentle Spanish lullaby that his own grandmother had sung to him as a child. The melody drifted through the air, filled with a sadness and beauty that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her soul. When Rosa returned to the bedroom, James noticed something he'd been too cynical to see before. Her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying, though her face remained composed. She moved to his bedside table, picking up the framed photograph he kept there, the only one in the entire room. It was a picture of his grandmother, the woman who'd raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 7. Rosa held the photograph gently, reverently even, and whispered something in Spanish. James, who'd learned the language from his grandmother, understood every word. Bendiciones a su alma, señora. Su nieto es afortunado de haber conocido tal amor. Blessings on your soul, ma'am. Your grandson is fortunate to have known such love. She carefully dusted the frame, placed it back exactly where it had been, and then did something that shattered James's carefully constructed emotional walls. She made the sign of the cross and bowed her head in a brief prayer. Not for herself, but for his grandmother, a woman she'd never met, whose photograph she cleaned with the care one might show their own family treasures. James felt something crack inside his chest, a fissure in the armor he'd built around his heart. This woman, this shy maid who barely spoke, who earned so little that $5 probably meant sacrificing lunch that day, was praying for his grandmother's soul. She'd protected his money with her own, sung lullabies while cleaning his bathroom, and treated a stranger's memories with more reverence than some people showed their own. Rosa moved toward the door, her work apparently complete, but then she stopped. She turned back, looking at James's sleeping form, and for a moment, he thought she might realize he was awake. But she didn't approach him or try to disturb him. Instead, she walked over to the window where the morning sun was streaming in, adjusted the curtains a fraction more, and said in her soft, gentle voice, "Que tengas un buen día, Señor Hartford. Que encuentres paz hoy. Have a good day, Mr. Hartford. May you find peace today." After she left, closing the door with barely a whisper of sound, James lay there for a long time, his eyes now genuinely closed, his mind racing. He'd set up a test designed to expose greed, dishonesty, or opportunism. Instead, he'd witnessed something he'd forgotten existed, genuine goodness. Not the performative kind that people displayed when they knew they were being watched, but the real kind, the kind that existed even in private moments, when there was no reward, no recognition, no benefit to being kind. James sat up slowly, his eyes falling on the $5 bill on his dresser. He picked it up, the crumpled paper soft in his hands, and felt shame wash over him. What kind of man had he become? When had he grown so suspicious, so cynical, so convinced that everyone had ulterior motives? His wealth had bought him land, horses, and security, but it had cost him something far more valuable, his ability to see the good in people. He thought about Rosa, really thought about her for the first time since hiring her. What did he actually know about her? Nothing, he realized. He'd never asked about her life, her family, her dreams, or her struggles. She was just the maid, a service provider, someone who existed in the background of his life. But she'd seen him. She'd seen his grandmother's photograph and recognized it as important. She'd prayed for a soul she didn't know because she understood grief and love and the importance of honoring those who came before us. James got out of bed and walked to his dresser, picking up the $100 bill from his jacket pocket where Rosa had carefully secured it. He placed it back on the dresser, next to her $5. Then he did something he hadn't done in months, he smiled. Not the practiced smile he used for business meetings or social obligations, but a real smile that reached his eyes and warmed his chest. He had tested Rosa, but in doing so, he discovered something about himself. He'd become so focused on protecting what he had that he'd forgotten to appreciate what truly mattered. Wealth could be stolen, businesses could fail, and possessions could be lost, but integrity, kindness, and compassion, those were the real treasures, and he'd just witnessed all three in a woman who probably didn't even realize how extraordinary she was. As James showered and dressed, his mind churned with questions. Why had Rosa taken his $100 bill and replaced it with her own $5? Was she worried he'd think it had fallen and been lost? Was she so honest that she couldn't bear the thought of him wondering where his money had gone? What circumstances had brought such a gentle, caring person to work as a maid in a stranger's home? And most importantly, what could he do to show her that her kindness hadn't gone unnoticed? He spent the morning in his study, but for the first time Rosa stood frozen in the kitchen, her hands gripping the counter as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Tears welled in her eyes, and she shook her head slowly. "You do not understand, Senor Hartford. That $5, it was all I had until payday next week. But I could not let you wake up and think your money had disappeared. I have worked in many homes, and I have seen what happens when things go missing. The maid is always blamed, always fired, sometimes even accused of worse things. I could not risk that you would think I had stolen from you." James felt his throat tighten. "You gave me your last $5 to protect your reputation. Rosa, why didn't you just leave my money where it was?" "Because it was not safe," she said simply, meeting his eyes for perhaps the first time since she'd started working for him. "It could have fallen. The window was open, and the breeze could have blown it away. I put it in your jacket pocket where it would be secure, but then I worried you would wake up, see the money gone from the dresser, and think." She trailed off, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I am sorry. I know it was foolish. $5 is not 100, but I thought if you saw some money there, you would not worry until I could explain." James pulled out a chair and sat down heavily, gesturing for Rosa to do the same. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but eventually perched on the edge of a chair across from him. "Tell me about yourself, Rosa," James said. "I realize I've never asked, and that's my failure, not yours. Who are you when you're not here cleaning my house?" Rosa looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting together nervously. "There is not much to tell, Senor. I came to America 5 years ago from Mexico. My mother was sick, cancer, and the treatments were expensive. My father died when I was young, so it was just her and me and my little brother. I came here to work, to send money home for her medicine." "And your mother?" James asked gently, though he already suspected the answer from the sadness in Rosa's voice. "She passed away 2 years ago," Rosa said quietly. "But by then, my brother was in school, and he is so smart, Senor Hartford. So very smart. He wants to be a doctor, to help people like our mother. So I stayed. I worked 3 jobs, here in the mornings, cleaning an office building in the afternoons, and at a restaurant at night. Every penny I do not need for rent and food, I send to him for his education." James sat in stunned silence. 3 jobs. This woman worked 3 jobs, survived on nearly nothing, and still found it in her heart to sing lullabies and pray for strangers and sacrifice her last $5 to protect her employer's peace of mind. "Why do you sing while you work?" he asked, remembering the gentle melody that had drifted from his bathroom. For the first time, a small smile touched Rosa's lips. "My mother used to sing all the time, when she cooked, when she cleaned, when she was happy, when she was sad. She said that singing keeps the soul alive even when the body is tired. After she died, I stopped singing for a long time. But then I realized that when I sing her songs, I feel close to her again. So I sing when I work, very quietly, so no one hears. It makes me feel less alone." "The lullaby you were singing this morning," James said. "My grandmother used to sing that same song to me." Rosa's eyes widened. "Your grandmother was Latina?" "She was Mexican," James nodded. "She married my grandfather and moved to Montana before my father was born. She never lost her accent or her love for her culture. She's the one who taught me Spanish, who showed me that wealth isn't measured in dollars but in the richness of the heart. She died 5 years ago, and I miss her every day." "That is why you keep her photograph by your bed," Rosa said softly. "And why you keep it in a silver frame, not gold. Silver was traditional in the old ways, humble but precious. Your grandmother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," James agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "And she would have liked you, Rosa. She would have recognized a kindred spirit." They sat in silence for a moment, the kitchen filled with an unexpected warmth. Finally, James stood up and walked to the counter where Rosa had been preparing lunch. He picked up the 2 plates she'd made, one presumably for him, the other probably to eat quickly in the kitchen before rushing to her next job. "We're both eating," he said firmly, setting both plates on the table. "And while we do, I want you to tell me more about your brother and his dream of becoming a doctor." Over lunch, Rosa slowly opened up. She told him about Miguel, who was 19 and studying pre-med at a community college in California. She showed James a photograph on her phone, a young man with Rosa's gentle eyes and a brilliant smile, standing in front of a library wearing a backpack and holding textbooks. "He works too," Rosa said with evident pride. "Part-time at a clinic, just cleaning and filing papers, but he learns from the doctors there. He tells me about the patients and the treatments, and I can hear in his voice how much he wants to help people. He has a scholarship that pays for most of his tuition, but there are still books, supplies, rent, food. It is expensive, Senor Hartford, but it is worth everything to see him succeed." "How much does he need?" James asked. "For the semester, I mean. What are his expenses?" Rosa looked uncomfortable. "Senor, I did not tell you this story to ask for money. Please, I do not want you to think. I don't think anything except that you're working yourself to exhaustion for a beautiful cause," James interrupted. "Humor me. How much?" Reluctantly, Rosa named a figure. It was approximately what James spent on a single horse saddle, or what he might drop on a business dinner without thinking twice. To her, it was months of backbreaking work across 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, surviving on rice and beans. To him, it was a rounding error in his quarterly budget. James didn't say anything immediately. Instead, he asked Rosa more questions about Miguel, about her life, about her dreams. He learned that she'd once wanted to be a teacher but had quit school at 16 when her mother got sick. He learned that she sent cards to elderly residents at a nursing home near her apartment because everyone deserves to be remembered. He learned that she donated her time on Sundays to a community kitchen, feeding homeless families even though she could barely afford to feed herself. After lunch, James asked Rosa to wait in the kitchen while he went to his study. She looked terrified, clearly convinced she'd overstepped somehow, but he assured her everything was fine. In his office, James made several phone calls, sent multiple emails, and made decisions he should have made months, maybe years, ago. When he returned to the kitchen, he was carrying an envelope and a folder of papers. Rosa stood up nervously, her hands clasped in front of her. "Rosa," James began, "I need to apologize to you. When I pretended to be asleep this morning, it was because I was testing you. I was suspicious, cynical, convinced that everyone was trying to take advantage of me. I'd forgotten that good people exist, truly good people who act with integrity even when no one's watching. You reminded me of something my grandmother used to say, la riqueza del corazón es la única que importa. The richness of the heart is the only kind that matters." Rosa said nothing, but tears began streaming down her face. "I've spent years protecting my money, my property, my assets," James continued. "But I forgot to protect my humanity. You gave me back something more valuable than anything in this house. You reminded me what real wealth looks like. So I want to do something for you, and I need you to let me do this. Not because you asked, but because it's the right thing to do." He handed her the envelope. Inside was a check for enough money to cover Miguel's entire undergraduate education, including room, board, books, and a living stipend so he wouldn't have to work while studying. Rosa's knees buckled, and she grabbed the counter for support. "Senor Hartford, I cannot, this is too much. I have done nothing to deserve." "You've done everything to deserve it," James said firmly. "You've worked with dignity and grace, you've shown kindness to strangers, you've sacrificed everything for someone you love. That's not nothing, Rosa. That's everything." "But I cannot accept such charity," Rosa protested, even as her hands trembled holding the check. "It is not right. I have not earned this." "Then let's call it a scola."